I'm very fortunate to have conversations with folks from a lot of different backgrounds. And one of the most fun videos I did was with my mentor, Grant Willard, middle-aged white executive that gave me my chance in technology many, many years ago. And we did a video series called Ask a Black Guy, Ask a White Guy. And we really dug into some of the issues around race from our different perspectives. And a lot of times when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, folks that are male and white and middle-aged feel attacked because a lot of the power structure in our country, those are the folks that are currently in power and have been throughout the history of our country. That's just a truth statement. However, in order for us to progress in this work, to move forward in this moment, everyone has to be included in the conversation. One of my good friends, Bob Batchelor, and I talk about some of these things all the time because I need his perspective just as much as he values mine, and we end up often with a third idea that we can both feel very strong about in our business context. That's an example of diversity. That's an example of partnership. But if folks feel marginalized when we're talking about inclusion, that's just not helpful. And so I don't think you should feel as the villain in the room in every meeting. I think that's wrong, and we need to work at that. The only thing that I would not caution, but I would just ask that you would think about is the perspective of folks in marginalized groups and communities that have never really had a voice before are now being heard. And so that does mean that the volume of voices that used to dominate the discussion all the time have to now participate with the many. And for a lot of folks, that is new and frustrating. And so you have to think about the dynamics that we're all working with. But I will say, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's just. And we're not trying to create an environment where white males feel like the villain in every room talking about DEI. I'll give another example of how I try to improve that in my own work. I don't talk about or use the term white privilege because that means I'm attacking. It's a very authoritative attack phrase. I talk about privilege. I'm very fortunate that my parents moved from the very deep South where education was not so good and moved to Connecticut where I was very well educated. I was able to attend college. I was able to be in good schools, all the different areas of my life by my choosing because of choices that my parents made. I had two parents in the home. These are privileges that I had. That doesn't make me better than someone else. It means my walk is different. So what I like to talk about is the responsibility we have with our privilege to do better for our organizations, for our families, and for the world. But I try not to talk about white privilege because that sounds attacking, but we all have privilege. And we just need to think about it in that way. So I do understand that narrative and that feeling, right, of being singled out, being vilified. And here's the last thing that I'll say. It sucks, doesn't it? I mean, I remember in school being the only person that looked like me in honors classes for years and years and years. And I remember what it feels like to be the only. I know what it feels like to be vilified because of who you are, and it doesn't feel great. Now, I don't wish that on you, but since you may have that feeling, I want you to empathize with folks in marginalized groups that have had that feeling their entire life. I don't want you to go through it any more than you have to, than we all have to. But there is a positive in that uncomfortable feeling, right? When you feel like you've been targeted and you haven't done a thing. It's not great.